Live froze and then the internet just stopped and kicked us off. So here we are. Welcome to week 3 of the WTF Live Window Treatment Friday. I'm Kim. I'm from WindowWorks. WindowWorks is located in Livingston, New Jersey. We're a window treatment and awning company, and we specialize to the trade and to retail.
And good afternoon to everyone watching, listening. My name is Vita. I'm the owner of Vitalia Inc., window treatments for interior designers. We are a measuring, fabrication, installation, and project management company exclusively to the trade as it relates to window treatments and coordinating projects and products as well. We're located in the greater Philadelphia area, and I'm super happy to be partnering here with Kim and chatting every Friday on this platform about our favorite subject, window treatments.
Woohoo! And today we are going to be discussing one of my personal favorites in the industry, which is drapery hardware.
Fun.
Love drapery hardware.
And just before we get to our favorite subject here, let me just give a real great shout out to a few people who have commented on our previous lives and have told us how much they've enjoyed it. We have Regina here who is saying, great job, very knowledgeable lady. So thank you so much, Regina. That was one of our previous episodes. And then we have Nicole Quinn who is saying, thank you for sharing. I love this and hope that you continue doing it. And thank you so much, Nicole. We certainly hope that we continue doing this as well. This has been a ton of fun. And you guys, please comment, ask us questions, give us your love, send us all the emojis you can find, hearts, waves, smiley faces, whatever you can. It always warms our heart. But the most important thing, if you have a burning question, a challenge, anything you want to talk about, put it in comments and we're here to answer that.
Yeah, and if you're here, unlike other Facebook, when you do a typical Facebook Live, since we are going through the Be Live platform, when you come in to watch, we don't necessarily know that you're here. So just drop us an emoji, a wave, a smile, or whatever in the comments so we can, say hi and whatnot. And if you have any topics that you want us to cover or anything or have an idea for a live, let us know and we can definitely talk about it in the future weeks.
Okay, hardware. So, Kim, the way I usually talk about hardware to my designers, and you tell me if you do the same thing to the consumers, is I try to simplify it for them and to really try to kind of cut down on the overwhelm, because we know that there's a ton of finishes, ton of sizes, different brackets, different rings, different this and the other thing, and so you can totally get confused. But if you kind of distill all of that craziness into just the most kind of basic parts, I think we can safely say that there's 3 types of hardware out there, kind of like big categories.
Absolutely, big picture.
Exactly. So the first one being traverse tracks.
Yep.
The second one being the same track, but with some sort of fascia covering it, so making it prettier. And the third one being rods and rings, different shapes, different styles, different finishes.
Absolutely.
But at its basis, they're rods and rings.
Yep. So, and essentially it's really like there's 3 categories, but it's, do you want decorative hardware or non-decorative hardware? And really, what does the project call for, essentially, too? So that's usually like where we start when we're trying to dig deep into hardware.
Exactly. And so in the next few minutes, we'll be going through these categories by showing you some specific examples of how we use them.
Absolutely. Here we go.
Okay, so this is actually a project that you saw last time. We referenced it in the context of the type of the header that it was, which is a wave or a ripple fold, whichever way you want to call it. But today I want to highlight the hardware that it was mounted on. And so what you're seeing on the left picture, and maybe even not seeing because it's so small and kind of slim, is there's a small, a rather like a very skinny line, white line. And what it is actually it's a white traverse track. It's very similar to what you're seeing here up at the top picture, but all the way up at the ceiling. And I think this was like 200 inches or maybe even more.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very skinny line. And there on the right, you're seeing a close-up of it and how really kind of sleek and indiscriminate it is.
Yeah, and this was like what we were saying last week with the example of a ripple fold rod. So you see how the rod sits above the fabric. So in a situation like this, if your client or if you want this type of treatment for your home and you don't want to see having like if you don't want to see a white track, then we can go with a decorative option, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what's great about this is it really is hidden when you install it on a ceiling, especially if the ceiling is white. And then we have done it before where we have cut a channel out in the ceiling. So the rod sits within that channel and then the fabric literally just looks like it's floating right from the ceiling.
That's really cool. And so this next example is not quite cutting a channel in the ceiling, but it's an example of how this traverse rod, which isn't necessarily very pretty, if you will. It's a very utilitarian rod. It's very commercial looking. So there's not a whole lot of aesthetic value in it. So it's really best when it's concealed. And so one of the other ways to conceal it, just like Kim was saying, to put it within a channel, or in this particular example, what you're seeing is it's actually inside a pocket and behind a crown. So here there was a wooden decorative crown that created a pocket. So essentially, if you think of the crown and how it adheres to the wall and it goes right up to the ceiling, in this situation the crown protruded forward. It was installed proud of the wall by about 7 inches or so, which is where we come in, because during construction this designer was smart enough to bring us in and say, what kind of projection do you want in order to be able to put in the rod there?
Yeah, and that's also dependent on what kind of window treatment you want to use. So in a situation like this with a ripple folds or the wave, we need the room for the fabric to undulate from back to front. Now, if you were doing a pleated treatment, we wouldn't need the pocket to stick out as far into the space. So these are things that if you're building a home or you're working with a client that's in the process of building, these are things that you want to reach out to your window treatment specialist, and we can totally help you out even in the planning phase. Even if you're not in building phase, but it's in planning phase, these are little tidbits that would really make it easier once it comes to the window treatment portion of the project.
And you just hit the nail on the head, Kim, because oftentimes, well, sometimes I should say, we get brought in during the pretty phase of the project, because that's
at the end.
That's when people have the bandwidth to start thinking about fabrics and curtains and furniture and all that wonderful, beautiful stuff. But here is a primary example where it's important to think about these things way ahead of the pretty phase, when it's still kind of ugly and dirty and the wires are sticking out everywhere.
Yeah, because that's also too, if you wanted to go with a motorized track in this situation, we have the opportunity to either put an outlet up in that pocket, which we've done a couple of times, or if it's direct wiring, then we can have the conversation with the AV team, with the electrician, to figure out what's the best solution for the drapery hardware, because motorized is also an option with drapery hardware. It's not just with a baton or a cord.
And actually, this particular example, this was an eating area off of the kitchen, and this was motorized. So both of these sides are motorized, and as you can tell in the other picture, they come to the side. So we were brought in not just for the projection of the pocket, but also to work with the electrician to run the wire, to know exactly where the switch is going to be, to know exactly where the junction box is going to be. And that's important too, because you put the junction box smack in the middle of that protrusion, and there you kind of trouble, because that's exactly where the rod needs to go.
Exactly. So it's
small insignificant detail, but at the end, it's like, oh my God, we should have really thought about it.
Exactly.
All right. So here I have
a cool product. Yeah,
it is a super cool product. So this is, we're getting into, so we're exiting the category of just simple traverse tracks, which was that first
Non-decorative.
category, the non-decorative, exactly. And now we're entering the category of the traverse tracks covered with something pretty.
Yes.
And that pretty part is called some sort of fascia. And here,
Mm-hmm.
Kirsch, which is a very popular and prominent company within the window treatment industry, providing wonderful hardware solutions to all of us window treatment specialists and designers. Here, they came up with this really cool and innovative product. So, Kim, want to take it away?
What I love about this product is it gives you this really cool fascia. And what you can see up on the top corner is the different colors that these fascias come in. And so, a couple years ago, we only really had the option if you wanted to just do something simple like what we showed you in the previous slide. Now you could really add another layer, another element without it if you didn't want to do, say, some type of a valance over your drape. And if you have more of a contemporary space, this is something that we can add to enhance the look and the design. So it's these really cool fascias that go right over it. It's the same tracks that we showed you before, but with just like a little piece of jewelry on top.
Yeah, and those colors are really cool. And they
Yeah.
don't have to be like the crazy, you're seeing some cobalts blue and orange and this funky
The
yellow.
yellow.
I was
Yeah.
just like, when I first this light came, I was like, whoa. And but you don't have to go that crazy. You can still stay in that sleek mode, but be in a little bit of an understated tones. We have some grays there, some really cool golds, neutral, some blacks. So really you're more basic but still modern
Mm-hmm.
colors, as well as some really funky colors.
Yeah, and the clear is pretty cool too because it almost looks like a piece of glass over the rod. So it is a nice just a nice option.
Exactly. Okay, here we're still in the category of traverse rods with fascia. And here, this isn't the glass fascia that we just saw with those interesting returns. Actually, we didn't mention them, but those were really pretty cool returns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but here we have a very sleek and very modern kind of fascia. It's rectangular or square, whichever way you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it also comes in different finishes, not quite as funky as the other ones, but this is metal. So this was a very contemporary environment that we did here in Montgomery County in Elkins Park, just outside of Philadelphia. And these draperies, they move, they function. So they close on the windows and they open. You see them in the open position right now. They're nicely dressed and the pleats are just evenly hanging, but the customer does have the option of closing them if they wanted some privacy at night.
And this type of rod is also works when you have a large expanse. So if you're dealing with a large picture window that's over, 10 feet wide and we need a certain amount of brackets to support that rod. This is an alternative so that this way you have the flexibility of opening and closing your drapes with the same amount of the proper amount of brackets that we need. Because if you wanted to do like what they have a lot of times in ready-made and what you can buy off the shelf, you can get these rods that could expand anywhere, the telescoping rods that go from 88 to 120. But in that, they only give you 3 brackets. And realistically, we know as as window treatment specialists that 3 brackets isn't going to cut it with all the weight, that the rod is going to come crashing down. So this is a great solution if you want to have a wide window treatment and the flexibility to open and close your drape without having to worry about the bracket or the ring getting stuck on the bracket.
Exactly.
Okay, so this was a photo that we showed you in our first episode, and this is a double rod situation here. So if with this particular client, they wanted to have a layer of privacy, which is the sheer that you see in the back, and a front layer where you have the decorative panels. So with going with a double rod situation, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. I know kind of in the picture, it almost looks like the sheer and the drape are on the same exact rod. But if but they're not. The drape is sitting in front. So this gives you the ability to have a stationary panel in the front and having an operable panel behind it. This particular client opted to have both the treatments on the decorative traverse rod, where sometimes in other situations you could have a rod with rings in the front and then the track right behind it. So that this way you have your pretty rings and you don't have to give that up, but then you have the operable rod behind.
And Kim, talk to us about the difference in projections between the first layer and the second layer.
Sure. So typically a standard projection would be about 3 inches. On a double rod situation like this, it's about anywhere from 6 to 7 inches. So you really need the room and the space. So if this is something that you're thinking that you want in this particular dining room, we have the space between the back of the table and the back of the chair to allow us to go out that 6 inches. But this is something to keep in mind if you have a big window behind a sofa and you want that double rod look, you're going to have to move your furniture into the space about 6 inches.
And I think this point can be underscored, any stronger, because, and I say that because I personally have made the mistake of not giving enough space between the two layers. Because, I don't know about you, Kim, but we usually get some pressure from our clients and our designers to not protrude into the room by too much. Nobody wants to take up the floor space, the room space. Nobody wants to have these 7, 8, 10 deep type of brackets. And so when I was will call me less experienced in this. I was just like, really, Mrs. Smith, you want it to be at 4 inches for 2 layers or even 5 inches? Yes, sure, I can make it work. I'm Vita, I can totally make it work. I'm not sure how, but I will make it happen. And, inevitably what happens is as soon as you start operating the front layer, and so not the sheer layer, but the over drape is another word for it. It starts dragging on the sheer. It starts really pulling that first layer, and that's the look that nobody wants. It doesn't look good. The functionality is not there. You constantly have to fiddle between the 2 layers. And so I even go, Kim, as far as say it's minimum of 7 inches, sometimes even 8, depending on the pleat, depending on the lining, the fabric. I mean, there's definitely other circumstances that are involved in it, but I will do everything possible to make sure that the 2 layers don't rub against each other.
Right. And the same thing holds true. Like in this situation, we had a drape and then a sheer behind it, but it would be the same projection out if it was a drape and a Roman shade, because we need the space. I'm going through that right now in my own home, where I have a window that I'm going to be putting a woven wood, and then I have to figure out how far out my drape needs to stick out in front of the woven wood and whether or not it's going to go into my walkway, into the space, and where the sofa lines up on the other side of the window. So yeah, these are challenges that, even, myself, I face. And I'm in the industry, so I share your pain. I get it.
Sometimes it is, but it's just kind of the necessary evil.
Exactly.
Like gravity is what I usually say. It's a fact. Okay, here we have a picture. Actually, it's a picture that I snapped at a show, the IWCE show.
Yes.
I think it was it in Charlotte last year?
Nashville.
In Nashville. It was in Nashville last year. It was supposed to be in Charlotte this year. Huge shout out to Grace and Anya and Vision Magazine, to Sophia. You guys, none of us got a chance to go to the conferences since probably, middle of March. And this particular one was supposed to be at the end, towards the end of March, where all the window treatment specialists and all the designers, we all congregate and show up and learn the latest and the greatest in hardware included and everything else window treatment. And it's just wonderful to see each other. Of course, we know that did not happen, but still a big shout out to the team and the wonderful job that they do to put this together. And as a matter of fact, they will, right, Kim?
Yep. We're doing it virtually, so I'm excited for that. So we could at least still connect the way that we are connecting now, our new temporary normal of connecting via the computer screen.
That's
So,
right. So I believe that show is scheduled for, it's IWCE 2020. It's scheduled
mhm,
for July 29th and 30th, I believe. And so definitely look them up on Facebook. But anyway, so I snapped this picture at the last year because this was
mhm,
a brand new introduction. Believe it or not, there were no flat rods with square rings, at least that I
yeah.
knew of. Maybe you did, up until last year. So I was super excited to see this.
Yeah, I love this trend of the flatter rod that's coming out. Kravit has a rod that's similar that used to have in our showroom. That it was we did a wood rod, so it was a square rod that was in a wood. It was in a really pretty whitewashed finish, and then we paired it with metal rings. So you got the both textures. You got, because everything right now in drapery hardware, it's very metal heavy. So everyone wants a metal rod, a metal rod, a metal rod. A couple years ago, 12 years ago when I started at Window Works, everything was a big wood pole, fluted, 3 inch, the biggest finial that could dub as like, a form of security because it was so heavy and so big. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I love wood poles personally. I love using them, and now they're coming out with really contemporary ways to use it. But this was it was our way of still kind of having a little bit of the wood, but with the cool metal touch. So yeah, the rectangular rods are becoming all the rave right now,
It's
and
all the
it's
rage. Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So this is an example of how really small rods are also all the rage. So we just told
yes,
you that the sleek rectangular or square rods with square rings is what's trending. Another trend in hardware for window treatments are very small diameter rods and very small rings. So it's complete an antithesis to what Kim just said was happening 10, 12, I think even like 5 years ago, to be honest. Like, remember,
yeah,
like even 5 years ago, I was still installing 2.25 inch rod with big rings and big hunk of
hmm
piniel. I mean, it's it was a big thing. And now everything is super small, tiny, kind of understated. So in
hmm
this picture, you see, I mean, these were, I mean, 9-foot ceilings. I mean, this was a pretty tall dining room, and these were, quite significant draperies at 1.5 widths each. And we opted for a very sleek and very small diameter rod. And one of the reasons that we did that, not only because in general the hardware is trending right now, but also the chandelier that they had above
hmm
that very traditional table was actually a very contemporary gunmetal, very small, like small diameter type of chandelier. So it all
Now,
worked together.
what size diameter rod did you use here?
This was 3/4.
Oh wow, so that's tiny. That's
Right.
that's that's very tiny.
Very,
Okay. And did
very
did
tiny.
these panels move, or were they more of a stationary operation?
Stationary.
Stationary, yeah.
Stationary
Because that's a
operation.
because
Exactly.
that would be a lot of weight for something that could move.
Right, right. And interesting, I will peel back the curtain on this one. So we ran into a bit of an issue here.
Mm-hmm.
Even though these were supposed to be stationary, and so distributing the weight on both sides of the rod, the window was about 48 inches in width
Mm-hmm.
and then clearing by about 10 to 12 inches each. So the rod was over 60 inches, so over
Mm-hmm.
5, maybe even 6 feet. And what started happening, and I even didn't realize it, and this is a recent job. So you guys, we are like peeling back the curtain.
Yeah.
We are completely in full transparency, honest. This is what happened. So I've been in this for 15 years. Well, back then it was 14. It was about a year ago, this job. And
Mhm.
guess what started happening?
It started to fall forward.
Uh-uh.
Oh,
It
what happened?
started sagging.
It started to smile, because that was going to be my question. How did you get away with not doing a center bracket there?
Exactly, exactly. So you can't, I mean, this was just as we installed, and it did nothing for a while. And then a few weeks later, the customer called and said, Vita, you wouldn't believe it. I'm like, what? she sent me a picture, and the rods started sagging or smiling, like Kim is saying,
Mhm.
just a little bit. So we ended up going back and installing a center bracket.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because that was going to be my follow-up question. I was going to be like, what rod is that you were able to do a 3/4 inch rod with only two brackets and no at that size? Okay. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So there you have it, guys.
Yeah.
What's the price worth of admission?
Yeah.
Right here. If you have a small little rod on even on the single window. I mean, this is a single window. It's not like even
Hmm.
a double window. It's not a hugely wide expanse. But when you have a thin rod with even stationary panels, even on a single window, you will most likely need a center support.
Yeah. Unless it's something that I have found there are companies out there, but these rods, then you're jumping up super high end where they are steel.
Correct.
And it is like things that you would use to build like a commercial building that it's not flexing. And we have used these kind of rods on certain projects where they want the thin rod, but they have a huge expanse. And even the first time that I was working with this company, it's the rods are made from iron. And I said, wait, I only need three brackets for this wide of a, I'm like, there's really? And they're like, no, it won't bend. They're and they're heavy. It takes two guys to put them up.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it's both Billy and Carlos to install these rods sometimes, depending on how wide the window is and
Okay.
whatnot. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I have had some success with a higher end companies, and also with higher end rods. Now, this is made out of wrought iron, and the company we use out of Colorado called Ona Drapery, which is a very
Mm-hmm.
high end, and they have beautiful finishes. And we have used their rods in small diameter, and this would have been the situation that we wouldn't have had to use that third bracket.
Right. Right.
But here, it's like you work within a certain budget, and you try to accommodate a certain budget, and inevitably there are consequences of
Yeah.
that. Put it that way.
Yep.
So here we have a situation that we just wanted to show it to you guys,
Mm-hmm.
where you can have still that round rod. It's just your traditional round rod with rings on a wider window. Here we have stationary panels as well, and this is totally the situation where you would use that center support bracket.
Yeah. Okay, so this was a project that we did for a client of mine for her master bedroom. So this was a huge master suite this is the dressing area, and it kind of had all these bump outs, and she wanted to have some kind of stationary panels to kind of frame out the space, but she didn't think that we would be able to achieve it because of all the weird angles that she had there. So you're able to do that with flexible elbows now. So now we have elbows that we can really follow the shape. And what's nice about them being flexible, a couple years ago, they were pretty 45-degree. That's that. Now with the ability to flex them open and close, because not every angle like this is going to be a 45-degree angle. We have the ability to really mold it to the shape of the window. And in this particular install, we had 3 elbows that we had to put in. And so it gave us the opportunity to match this little bump out seating area to the other windows that she had, because she had 3 other windows in the room that were just your standard single window that we just did a typical just rod going across and panels on the side. So
Great job on this one.
thank you. Yeah, it was one of my favorites. I love it when we have like a complicated window situation that I get to learn a new drapery rod. Hopefully in the fall I'll be doing a project where the room is circular.
Oh
So
my
and we're doing like a decorative circular rod. So once that project is
awesome.
all the details are figured out, we will talk about that in the future.
We'll circle back, and we'll have a circular rooms topic, and we'll have one picture to show you.
Yeah, no, we did. We had another rod like that too, that we had a template and it had to go through CAD, and it gets a little crazy, but there's definitely ways to do it.
Yeah. And that's what I found too. I mean, we've worked with so many challenging windows and challenging situations, but honestly can't think of one instance where we couldn't find a suitable solution that
Right.
worked for the client and for our designers. So, and everybody
Right.
walked away happy. It's the product knowledge, it's the
Mm-hmm.
expertise, the experience, having made the mistakes and knowing not to make them again. And also, I find that it's knowing where to push. And
Right.
so, if there's a situation and we've never really done it, but you just feel it in your gut that you can because you've done something similar, or you know of a product that can do something that
Yeah.
ultimately may result in what you need. And so, it's about asking the right questions. It's about pushing in the direction that you need it to go, and just not stopping until you get the answer
Yeah.
that you really want. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Ooh, the
this
loose
was
light.
a really cool situation where this was an apartment in Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
where we did was a kind of a contemporary situation, even though you may see the very traditional herringbone floors, but everything else was very contemporary. And the rods were acrylic rods. And
Yeah.
so acrylic is all the rage as well, just like it
Mm-hmm.
is in the interior design aspects. We're doing acrylic chairs, acrylic stools, acrylic coffee tables, and I'm sure many other things that I don't even know about.
Mm-hmm.
Acrylic has made its way to the window treatment world, and here it is in full glory, installed as beautiful hardware.
And with the acrylic, now you also in it when it first came out, it was just you only had the option of going round. Now you have the option of going with that square with the square metal rings. So you can do the rectangular trend or the round.
Exactly. This particular one was a square rod,
Mm-hmm.
and the company that we use is Brimar for our square
Mm-hmm.
acrylic rods, and they have two finishes for the brackets and the rings, either the gold or the silver, like the chrome type look. And then
Yeah.
here it was chrome.
Yeah, it's a very unique and cool accent that you can just add little touches of metal. And I
Mhm.
love that, you can use the chrome bracket and then the usually people will use an end cap typically on the acrylic rods. Although I've seen, the fancier finials, but yeah, it's just a very unique way to add another decorative element to the space.
Mhm. And here, we wanted to show you, actually, to Kim's earlier point, don't be afraid to mix and match.
Hmm.
So this particular picture actually shows two things. Number one is another trend in hardware is resurgence of brass.
Oh yes, everything's brass. Every
Right.
50 Shades of Brass.
We didn't think brass was going to come back from the 90s, but here it is.
Hmm.
It's back. And in this particular instance, we've combined brass rod and rings and hard and a bracket with acrylic finial, which kind of added an additional dimension and gave us something different.
Yep. Okay, here is one of the biggest trends that's probably exploded in the last 2 years, and that is the French return rod. And in these pictures, it's two separate projects that we did for Maureen Orsino here in Jersey. And we did, for both projects, we did a black finish, which is kind of the popular color that people are selecting for the French return rods. Something sleek. You can get it in all different types of diameters. On the panel on the picture on the left, the panels are draped headed panels where we actually sewed the rings to the fabric, and that kind of created this really loose but tailored looking pleat. And on the right, that is more of the inverted French or top pleat. That we did there. And what I love about this, it's you don't need to have any kind of finials because I'm seeing that trend also too that everyone's kind of steering away from finials. That it's more just like I want something simple and sleek, an end cap, and this kind of gives you the alternative of not having to worry about having any kind of finial. It just returns right back to the wall. And what I've learned also in quarantine now is that this is usually a rod with ring application. I don't remember the brands, but now you have the ability to do a traverse French return rod.
Ah, I don't think I knew that.
Uh-huh.
So there it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
Learn
Because
something new every day.
exactly. I have a lot of clients that like the look of the French return. They'll say, I want a French return without rings. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a, we can't do that. But now you can. So I have to go back and figure out where I saw it. But I knew that I was like, oh, this is awesome that we could now have
That's great.
the best of both worlds. So you can have the French return and not worry about having the rings.
Very cool. And it's like, you just truly learn something new every day. Even,
Yeah.
my husband is in the computer software development industry. And I mean, talk about industry moving at 100 miles a second. I mean, literally a second. And, yes, there's lots of changes in the design industry, and there's certainly changes in the window treatment industry, but not nearly at the same pace. And there's still new things that you thought you knew everything, and there's still something to know. So,
okay, we have a question here. How much do you add to fabric when you do a French return rod? So typically with the return, it depends on what the return is. For this particular rod, we made the return about 6.5 inches so that this way the fabric could go back to the wall without having to have the pleat really go around the bend there, the elbow of the rod, so that it just looks like a typical installation with a standard rod going across.
mm-hmm. And also, depending on which return you pick, I think different vendors have different projections. You can usually have like a single projection or a double projection. And I'm kind of generalizing now, but normally it's like a 3-inch for a single, maybe 4.5, 5, 6 for a double. And so in order to know what kind of return to specify on your draperies, you need to know which return you are specifying on your hardware.
Yeah. And typically, if it's a 3, we like to go 6, just to give you that kind of play. And the installer, even if you feel like, wow, 6 seems like a lot, the installer has a way, at least I know Bill does, where he can make it work, and it won't look silly from the side. Hope that answers your question, Inga.
And if anybody else has any other questions, by all means, please put them in comments and wave to us and send us your hearts too.
Alrighty, and we that is it. This was a long one, but you know what? I love drapery hardware, and there's a lot that goes into it. So I know sometimes designers get a little scared when it comes to drapery hardware. So for us, it's really, if you want to use a different rod, don't worry about it. Show me what you want. I'll figure out a way to make it, appear on your project. I love learning about new rods. There was one summer that I had to learn 5 new vendors because designers were really thinking out of the box and they really wanted to go for it. And for me, it was like, hey, they didn't want to worry about ordering it, being responsible for it. They just showed me a picture and said, make this appear. And I said, no problem. So it's definitely a topic I can talk on and on and on about.
That's so very true. My interior designers as well, they're so up to date on kind of the latest trends in the design industry, and they look through all the magazines and catalogs, and they're just so versed. And oftentimes they would send me a tear sheet on something and say, we want this look, and what vendors do you have to replicate this look? And sometimes I have my go-to vendors that have that look, and sometimes I don't. And then it becomes about research and about creating new relationships. And to go back to the other point I made, it's knowing what questions to ask of the vendors, of the new vendors that we're trying to create relationships with. But that's our job. That's what we do. Yeah. It's not the designer's job. It's not the consumer's job. That's what we do. It's our job to be on top of the trends and on top of the technical engineering specifications to make sure that the rods don't sag, that they can fit into the elevator of a high-rise building, that the rings don't get caught in the seam, that the carriers don't get caught in the seam, that just everything goes smoothly.
There's a lot that goes into drapery hardware. So I know it can be a scary topic, but if you have questions or anything, you can always reach out to myself or to Vita. Okay, Inga, you have one more question. Do you Okay, so the question is, do you always have to install the rods first before you can measure the length of the drapes? Well, it's it all depends on if the rod is floating in air, then you don't necessarily need to have the rod figured out in terms of what to make your drapery length. It's more when you're pinched into crown to the ceiling, or if your client, or if you're saying, I want the rod to be at 98 inches, then yes, you need to know the rod um, before you can make the drape. You need to know because you have to take the proper deduction. I still go to my installer all the time, especially if it's a new rod, and I'm like, what is the deduction? And he sits there and he calculates it out and does all that good stuff for me. So thank goodness for Billy.
Inga, I can also tell you that you don't necessarily have to install the rod.
Yes, you don't have to put it up.
You can, but like you said, it just delays the process, and it's not really productive, and it's not cost effective for you as a business person. So yeah, if it were, then yes, perhaps the ultimate thing would be to install the rod first and then measure exactly that distance from the rod or from the ring to the floor and in different places too, because there's floor variations. And it's not feasible. And
No.
so what needs to happen is you need to figure out what Kim just said. It's called bracket deduction. And that is the distance between the highest point of the hardware to the lowest point of the hardware where your drapery will hang. The highest point can either be the top of the bracket, or it can be the top of the rod, or it can be the top of the finial. And so you need to know that. And then you have to mathematically figure out what is the distance from that highest point to the top of your drapery. Now, the top of your drapery can sit either right under the rod if it's on the carrier, or it can sit right under the ring. So your lowest point would be the bottom of the ring or the top of the ring eyelet. So yeah, it's a little bit of a technicality for sure. And actually, it is one of the reasons, one of many reasons why I know our designers delegate a lot of their window treatments to us, to Vitalia Inc. and to you guys and Window Treatment, Window Works in New Jersey, because bracket deductions can kind of make you or break you sometimes.
Yeah, it can, and it makes a world of difference. So another tip too is that you could always call the different vendors and ask them for a piece of the rod and the ring and the bracket, so that this way, I've done that before, especially if I know it's a company that we're going to be using a lot, especially in the beginning. We'll ask them for, a little tiny piece of rod, and we kind of put it together, and we'll figure out the deduction that way. A lot of the catalogs, you can ask the vendors for specs on the, internal ring diameter, the rod, the projection of the bracket, all that kind of stuff. They do have CAD drawings of it. That don't be afraid to ask, because they'll be able to help you out with that. Hi, Mimi.
Hey, Mimi. Oh, it's so good to see you here, love. And she's saying, oh, I love that one in our class.
Yeah.
And what Mimi is referring to is the class that I actually taught in the beginning of the year. It was called Profit with Window Treatments. And it's a class that I taught exclusively to interior designers and window treatment specialists who wanted to either add the window treatment component to their business, or to become more confident in it, or to become real, true experts in window treatment, because they were trying to become the window treatment professional and concentrate specifically in that area. So that was an 8-week class, and it was a wonderful, intimate group of girls, designers that we became friends with. And oh, Mimi, my love goes out to you, honey. Thank you.
And Katrina's here, and yes, we will be doing more of these kind of events. We pushed this one off to 3 o'clock this week because of a little scheduling thing, but don't worry. Just know that we will be here every Friday. The time might vary.
We have free goodies for you. So
yes,
not everything is about pictures and eye candy here on this live, but please know there's more information that we have available for you, resources that you can take advantage of today if you go on our websites.
Yes. And if you want to keep up with Miss Luann, yeah, be sure to follow her on Instagram at Luann Igara. And if you're not listening to the podcast yet, download it. There's a lot of great information there. And then that's where you can hear the audio version of Window Treatment Friday, where this whole idea and concept of WTF Live came from. Luann and Vita have been doing a podcast series on window treatments there. So you could learn from them and then come here to get the visual part of it. Hey, Wendy. How are you?
Oh, hey, Wendy. Love these videos. Oh, awesome.
Thank you.
And so you guys, please connect with us. Connect with us here in comments, of course. We'd love to hear what you have to say. We would love to feature you in our next episode and let everybody know what you thought and mention you, of course. And please connect with us on Instagram for Vitalia Inc. It is Vitalia_Inc. Or here's my phone number and email. Please, if you're a designer in the Philadelphia area looking for support in the area of window treatments, if you want support in your projects, my team is here to do everything that's needed for you to feel good and supported and like you know what you're doing. And our job is to make you look like a hero to your client.
Yes. And for Window Works for the New Jersey, New York area, you could follow us on Instagram at Window Works. And then if you have any questions or anything, you could always reach out to us. We are happy to help, even though we're working a little remotely. But hey, it's our new temporary normal. But still, in these times, we would gladly help you out with any window treatment or awning project that you may have.
Thank you so much, you guys, for tuning in, and we will see you next Friday.
Yes, have a great weekend. Enjoy the nice weather here on the East Coast. So, bye, guys.